right. Thank you, everyone, for attending today's 30-minute Wednesday webinar. My name is Mike, and I am a systems engineer with Variphy, and I am your host. I am joined today by Victor Verba. Today, he'll be explaining how Variphy determines different call scenarios, from everything from abandoned calls to connected, not connected, or calls that go to voicemail. So let's get started. Right. With today's agenda, we'll get started with an overview of our company and what we do. Then we'll jump into a demo where Vic will go over the different call scenarios. After that, we'll wrap up with some Q&A. If you have any questions, you can ask them in the Q&A panel in the bottom right corner of your screen. And then after Q&A, we'll go ahead and reward one lucky attendee with a $50 Amazon gift card. So make sure you stay till the end to see if you've won. Quick overview. Variphy is the preferred analytics management solution for Cisco collaboration. We provide industry-leading CDR reporting, call analytics, customizable dashboards, UCCX real-time wallboard reporting and analytics, remote phone control, macros and broadcast, change management, as-built reporting, DN, DID, and dial plan management. We have a few different solutions available, but today we are going to focus on the call analytics portion of the software. And NECS. Before we get started, Variphy now offers Ninja Enhanced Consulting Services, or NECS. What is NECS? Well, it's when one of our systems engineers, like Victor or myself, will engage remotely on a one-on-one basis with you to provide additional consulting services. It could be anything on reporting, dashboard configuration, system monitoring. This provides a dedicated SE or service engineer to you. We'll do all the heavy lifting. If someone needs a report, they can contact us and we'll create the report for them. If you want any additional information, please let us know or speak with your account manager, and we'll be more than happy to go over our consulting services more in depth. With all that said, I want to thank everyone for attending, and I'm going to pass the ball to Victor.
Thank you, Mike, and thank everybody for joining us today. So the purpose of today's webinar is we're going to get into a little bit of the call scenarios. A lot of times we get a lot of questions regarding different calling scenarios. What's an abandoned call? You know, what's considered answered? What's considered connected, and things like that. So we're going to try to clear some of that up today. So let's go ahead and jump right into it. We got a lot of content to go through. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to start off in my reports. I have a general report created over here that's really just for a couple of extensions. So it's a very simple report. I'm looking at two extensions, just monitoring the calls coming in. But I've added some of the statistics that we're going to go ahead and talk about today. So we're going to cover things like, connected calls, total call count, pretty straightforward, number of calls being presented to the extensions I'm querying. But we're going to get into all of these available fields here. I'm going to turn on cradle to grave so we can kind of take a look at some of our more advanced scenarios like transfer calls and forward calls and things like that. So let's give this guy a run and let's start taking a look at some of our calling scenarios. First thing we're going to look at here, and let me set my time window here, is we're going to go ahead and query some calls. So first thing we see is total number of calls that we have here, and that's basically all the calls presented to my search. In other words, I searched for these two extensions. This is the total number of calls being presented to those extensions. That doesn't necessarily mean they were answered. Those are just calls that were presented. Some of these may be forward. As we can see, we have some forward calls. Some of these may be connected, not connected. But we're here to talk about what are the differences of some of these scenarios. What makes a connected call versus a not connected call versus an abandoned call? What we have here right off the bat is we can see we've got 3 not connected calls, but only 2 abandoned calls. So really, what's the difference? And that's what we're going to talk about. So let's start off with what a connected call is. Connected call is basically pretty simple. It's a call where the date-time connection of the call is greater than the date-time origination. So let's talk about that a little bit. And I'm going to blow this guy up here so everybody can see it. Within Cisco data, we receive a couple different dates and times. Those dates and times are used to determine when a call was placed or received, but also maybe how long it rang and also the duration of the call. So talking a little bit about that, duration of the call is determined by the time a call connects and the time a call terminates. In Cisco terminology, that is a date-time connect and a date-time termination. So anytime I'm looking to see a duration of a call or why a duration is what it is, I can always include that date-time connect or date-time termination because that's what Variphy uses and that's what Cisco says is what determines a duration of a call. Now, date-time connect is the moment a call gets picked up or received. So in other words, when voice communication gets established. All right. So what is a connected call? A connected call is something where the date time origination is greater than or equal to the date time connect. That is a connected call. Taking a look through our data here, I could see that these two calls connect because the date time origination is greater than or equal. So essentially, anytime you're going to see a date time connect in here, that is going to be considered a connected call. Connected call is a very general terminology, just means that that call connected to some type of party. All right. It does not look at duration to determine if it connected. As you can see with this one right here is, we have our date time connect of 12:08:50 and our date time disconnect, or our date time origination of 12:08:50 and our date time connect of 12:09:08. All right. So we can see that this call actually had some ring time. However, it did connect regardless of the fact of whether there's duration or not. This is considered a connected call. All right, so that's really as simple as it gets from a connected call perspective, where this call here, there is no date time connect. This call never connected to an endpoint or an end user. This is what we would consider a not connected call. And that kind of rolls us right into our next category. What does not connected mean? Not connected is pretty simple. It means that there is no date time connect to that call. It never got connected to an end user. But a lot of people ask, well, what's the difference? What is a not connected call as opposed to an abandoned call? So the difference is a not connected call is one that has no date time connect, but as we can see as I'm looking through this data, doesn't necessarily mean that it was abandoned. So a lot of times what you can have, and I'm going to blow this down a little bit, a lot of times what you can have are auto forwards, or you can have route points within your phone system that automatically forward calls to different endpoints. In situations like that, they don't necessarily connect to that endpoint and then forward the call off. It's part of your phone system. Those calls are automatically routed to different endpoints. So taking a look at this example right here, this is a perfect example of a not connected call, but also not abandoned. All right, an abandoned call is determined based off of these cause codes, and we're going to talk about that in a second. But let's dig a little bit more into this not connected call. So right here I have a call that I have a date time origination, but I have no date time connect. That tells me right off the bat this is a not connected call. All right, but the next thing I have is I also have these cause codes here, which are call split. These cause codes are telling me that this call is split to go do something else. And if I click on my cradle to grave over here, it's going to bring us down to the calling scenario. So this is a perfect example of a call that is not connected but also not abandoned. The reason being is here we can see it did not connect, but it also goes off to do something else. So this is exactly the scenario I was talking about, where you have a routing situation where this call came in from 11:53, goes to 14:24, which automatically creates a Cisco call leg and then connects the call to the 14:24 extension. So what we have here is what's considered a not connected call, and it's also considered part of a transfer call. All right, we're going to talk a little bit about transfers in a second as well, but I just wanted to make sure people understand the difference between a not connected call and a connected call. And now we're going to talk a little bit about the difference between a not connected call and an abandoned call, because there's absolutely a difference. Now, an abandoned call is also included in the not connected count because in actuality, it never got connected to anybody. So not connected includes abandoned, but it also includes those auto forwards and transfers and things like that. But let's take a look at an abandoned call. So abandoned is something that did not get connected, but it has a very specific call clearing code. So for a call to be abandoned, it means it came into somebody, did not get picked up, did not go to voicemail, and the caller hung up. So let's take a look at this, at a couple of calls here. So here we have a call with a date time origination and no date time connect. We know right off of the bat that is not connected because it does not have a date time connect. But what this call has that makes it different from just a not connected call is it has an originating cause code of normal call clearing. So an abandoned call is a call with no date time connect and an originating cause code of normal call clearing. Normal call clearing means that is the person who disconnected the call. So what we have in this case is I have my caller coming in to my extension 7424, and letting it ring for about 15 seconds and then hanging up that call before it goes and does anything else. I can tell because it did not split off anywhere. It does not have a duration, and it has no connection time. So the easiest way to really go ahead and identify abandon is there's no connection time, and also there is no originating cause code. Now, a lot of times we get the question is, I really just need to filter in. I need to see my abandoned calls. Those are great widgets to be able to have when you're monitoring your employees or your call centers, just to really see, just the abandoned calls that are ringing at extensions that may not have gotten answered. So we're going to use this example right here, and we're going to run a report for just abandoned calls. So in this report, I'm running two different extensions, 7424 and 1424. So let's go ahead and run a quick search for just those extensions, 7424 and 1424. All right, I'm going to use my previous week, and we're going to view all of the results here. So you can see we have 14 calls, which matches what our report is. We're reporting 14 calls. But we want to filter onto just those abandoned. A couple different ways you can do that is, one, I can go ahead and say I only want to include connected calls or only include not connected calls. But as we talked about before, not connected is a general network term. That could also be your forwards and your call splits and your device routing and things like that. And if I look at these calls, you can see here's my date time connect field, and these are all blank. So I've narrowed the playing field a little bit. I'm down from 14 calls to just seeing my not connected calls, which also includes my abandoned. If I scroll over to the right, I also included my cause codes. Again, an abandoned call is only going to have a normal call clearing under the originating cause code. That means the person calling in hung up that call. So to add to this, what we can do is add another filter for cause code. And I could say, I only want to see the originating cause code of normal call clearing. Now what I'm doing is I'm filtering in on only my not connected calls, but also only my abandoned calls by saying I just want to see the ones that are normal call clearing. And if I edit that guy, now all I'm seeing are the abandoned calls to my extension 7424. So that's one way to go ahead and narrow down abandoned calls. And it's something that we get a lot of questions on, is how can I see just those abandoned? Because we see a lot of not connected in there. But one of the big things to take away from not connected is not connected means different things. It means abandoned, but it also means rerouted calls, forward calls, calls hitting route points and automatically rolling to different endpoints and things like that. Okay. So the next thing we're going to take a look at is we're going to take a look at an abandoned off hook. Now, I don't have any data for an abandoned off hook, but abandoned off hook concept is pretty simple. Every time you pick up your receiver on a Cisco phone, it generates a call leg, whether you dial something or not. So if I just pick up my receiver right now and hang it up, that's an abandoned off hook. An abandoned off hook is going to match an abandoned call. It's also going to be not connected, but the difference between off hook is you're not going to have any dialed party. That means I basically just picked up my receiver and hung up my receiver. Okay, so that's pretty straightforward. Next thing we're going to take a look at is a connected call. So connected calls basically is something that has a date time connect that is greater than the date time origination. Again, kind of the opposite of a not connected call. So with not connected, we're saying, hey, there's never going to be a date time connect. But with a connected call, again, pretty straightforward. It means that there is going to be some type of connection call. That doesn't necessarily mean it was answered. Doesn't mean that there's voice or even talking, like in this particular case right here. I have a connected call with 0 duration. That call's still connected into, in my case, my auto attendant or my voicemail system. That's going to be tracked as a voicemail call. But because it does connect to voicemail before this person hung up, that is going to be considered a connected call. So again, very simply, a connected call is just a call that has date time origination as well as a date time connect. Again, it's kind of a general term. So let's go ahead and dig a little bit more into that general term of connected call. We're going to talk a little bit about what's considered an answered call. Now, every time somebody sees the word answer, they make the assumption that there's voice communication. Somebody picked up this call and had a conversation. Unfortunately, with Cisco, it's not as easy as that. An answered call is a call where there's a date time origination, like what we have here, that is greater or equal to the date time connect. In other words, here I have 0. Or here I have a 0 duration. However, my date time origination is greater than or equal to the date time connect. In other words, I show that I have some values here. So what we have here is what's going to be considered an answered call. Now, even though there is 0 duration, we are showing that this call did go through and did get connected. So for that, we are going to go ahead and display that there is an answered call. Now, from a talk time perspective, no, there is no talk time on here. And those can be narrowed down by adding things like short duration calls and saying I want to see short duration calls that are, 0 duration. But from an answered perspective, this is something that is going to be considered answered because we do show that it has a date time origination and that the date time connect is greater than the date time origination here. All right, so from an answered perspective, the main thing that we're looking at is to determine is from when the call originated to when it got connected, do we have some difference in value? But the other thing that really differentiates an answered call is the fact that it didn't go to voicemail. So if a call comes in, and this is a perfect scenario, where technically this could be considered an answered call. However, this is my voicemail system. So for us, the answered count will be 9. This will not fall under an answered count. It will fall under voicemail. So when you think of answered, it's a call that connects, but it does not connect to voicemail. It connected somewhere at an end user or some type of end user type entity. All right. I know that could be a little bit confusing at times because everybody's looking at answered as in there's talk time and there's duration. Unfortunately, like I said, it's just not as simple as that when you're talking about Cisco, because whether a call connects or doesn't connect, it still got picked up at that endpoint enough to establish a connection. And from that perspective, that is what's considered an answered call within the Variphy system. As long as it doesn't go to voicemail and has a connection time, that is going to be considered an answered call. All right. So the next thing we're going to take a look at is voicemail. How does Variphy know what my voicemail system is? So there's a couple different things that we do to determine voicemail. First thing we try to do is we look in your call manager. Within call manager, you could set up voicemail and voicemail ports. If you're using a standard Unity system, you more than likely have voicemail ports in there. What we're going to do is we're going to automatically try to detect that information. We're going to go out to your call manager. We're going to say, hey, you have voicemail ports listed. Anytime we see something go to any of these voicemail devices or voicemail ports, we're going to automatically count that as voicemail for you. All right. But unfortunately, or fortunately, with SIP gateways nowadays, a lot of times we see that rather than having that Unity connection server directly established and those voicemail ports established within the call manager, people are using SIP gateways as their connection to Unity. Perfectly standard. We see that more and more often when people are integrating into SIP gateways. So when something like that occurs, Variphy doesn't know that it's a voicemail device because it's not listed as a voicemail device within your call manager. But what we can do within Variphy is identify those voicemail ports or voicemail devices. So now what I'm in is I'm still in the reporting section of Variphy. I'm under the configure section. And if I go to CDR devices, here I can actually add devices and specify them as voicemail devices. So in my system, you can see I have this device right here, CUC-Variphy. That's actually a SIP gateway that goes to my Unity system. So those voicemail ports are not in my call manager. But what we've done is we've overridden that call manager lookup, and we're saying, hey, anytime we see this particular device, we're going to know it's voicemail, and we are automatically going to go ahead and track those as calls to voicemail. And if you're looking at my data here, we can see we have 2 counts to voicemail. And if I look at my terminating devices here, I can see I've got 1, I've got 2, and that's it. I have no other calls going to voicemail. So great way to be able to go ahead and just quickly identify, from a department perspective or end user perspective, how many calls are going to voicemail and things like that. So the other thing we're going to take a look at, and I'm just going to backtrack a little bit, is we wanted to look at our answered count here. So one of the things we established right off of the bat is an answered call is a connected call. We can see we have 14 calls, 9 of them were answered. This excludes calls to voicemail. So if we exclude our calls with no date time connect, we have 1, 2, 3 calls with no date time connect. We've got 2 calls going to voicemail. So the rest of our calls are going to be followed under our answered count. So pretty straightforward there, how we develop those counts. Answered count is something that has connection time but did not go to voicemail. Voicemail is established, one, by looking in the call manager, and if we can't determine voicemail from call manager, we look back at Variphy to make sure that that voicemail device was added. So if you're ever running into a scenario where you see calls going into voicemail, but your voicemail counts are coming back as 0, it's more than likely that you just need to add your voicemail device into Variphy's CDR devices. Again, that's under call analytics and reporting, configure CDR devices. You can add your voicemail device in there, just specify it as voicemail. No need to do anything else. Variphy is going to automatically pick that up for you going forward. All right. Next thing we're going to go ahead and take a look at are forward calls. Forward calls are, again, pretty straightforward information. So the way that Variphy determines a forward is we don't really look at the redirections and things like that. What we predominantly focus on is where the call was going to and where it ended. In my case, these 2 calls got forward to voicemail, so they count as forward calls going to voicemail. So if I were to take this and let's say maybe I had my call set to call forward all and it was going to an outside number, maybe to my cell phone, that's going to be considered a forward call because we'll see the call coming into my extension and then forwarding back out to my cell phone number or wherever I'm forwarding that call. So forward calls are basically just a difference between the digits within the original called party number and final called party number. Okay, so next thing we're going to take a look at, and this is always a big one, is transferred calls. What's the difference between a transferred from and a transferred to? So it's actually a lot simpler than it sounds. For a transferred call, we look at the last redirect reason. All right, so in this report, I added last redirect reason. Anytime I see call transfer or blind transfer in this column, we're going to count that as a transferred call. All right, so this is Cisco terminology reiterating back the reason that this call was presented. In other words, the last reason that this call was redirected. So I can easily say, let's take a look at this guy. I have 5 transferred calls. If I look at my last redirect reasons here in my data, I can see I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And it's always nerve-wracking going through there because sometimes you're just like, oh, I hope I said something right. But yeah, so you know, the idea behind transferred is pretty straightforward. And like I said, blind transfer, it's going to say blind transfer in here. If it says call transfer, that means it is a consultative transfer, which brings us right to our next topic. What's the difference? How do we know what a consultative transfer is? So a consultative transfer is a transfer that there is some type of consult record. Okay, so basically what I clicked on was the cradle to grave here. So when we have a consultative transfer, we actually receive a leg of call that indicates that there was a connection between the transferring party to the transferred party. So looking at this scenario, a call comes in, they go to my contact center. The contact center presents this call. This actually creates a consultative transfer leg from my contact center here to my end user 7424, and in this case, it's Christy. So this means that we now have a consultative transfer leg, and you'll notice this is also a connected leg right here. So we have that consultative transfer leg, and then we have Christy actually receiving the call from the end user here. So what we have is the main person calling in, going into my auto attendant in this case, and going into my contact center. My contact center is set up to transfer that call over to my end user. So now I can see here's my contact center port, transferring the call over to my end user, and here's my end user receiving that call. And you can see the caller ID matches the caller of the person coming in. So I have the contact center transfer, but then I have the end user actually receiving that call and talking for 1 minute and 34 seconds. So that's what's going to make up a consultative transfer leg. However, determining whether it's a consultative transfer or blind transfer is pretty straightforward because really all we're doing is looking at the reason that that call was redirected. If this was a blind transfer, we're not actually going to even see this leg. What we'll see is just the bottom portion, and it will say blind transfer instead of call transfer. Also, what we're looking at here, when we talk about transfers is there's always a lot of question about, well, what's a transferred from and what's a transfer to? And I know I have a limited amount of time here, so I'm going to try to squeeze this part in because it's always a bit of a source of headache. A lot of times, especially with consultative transfers, route points and contact centers, anytime a call gets transferred from the contact center, it kind of creates multiple legs, as we see right here. So what we have here is a call transfer to 7424, and again, a call transfer to 7424, but this is also a transfer from 724. So the call comes in transferred to 7424, but then 7424 transfers the call back to itself. And I know that seems redundant, but we are working with the limitations of Cisco data. The reason that it does this is because you have that consultative leg. This leg here is the initial transfer from your contact center to the extension 7424. And the additional transfer is 7424, kind of, for lack of a better word, transferring it to itself to actually establish the call. So in this scenario, what we're seeing is actually a transfer, two transfer twos, but also transfer froms, because each one of these is being transferred from 7424, but it's also being transferred to 7424 from itself. And I know that could be a bit confusing, and we're always here to help with those and help diagnose some of those transferred scenarios, because this is actually a really easy scenario to look at because we've only got a couple calls. Many times, especially with hunt groups, we'll see these calls bounce around multiple times, hit multiple hunt groups and things like that. But one of the things to keep in mind is when you're looking at these legs is this consultative leg here has a lot of effect when you're looking at your transfer to and transfer from counts, because it is both. It is a transfer to, but it is also a transfer from itself when it actually establishes that connection call. I know we are almost out of time, so a couple other things that I wanted to clear up is one of the big questions we always have is ring time. How is ring time established? Ring time is pretty straightforward. Cisco provides us the time the call originates. It also provides the time the call connects. Connection time in Cisco's terminology is when voice is established. So to establish ring time, all we do is we say, well, the call was presented at this time, talk time started at this time. The difference between this and this is the ring time of the call. So that's how we establish ring time at the moment. We are currently working on some advanced ring time analytics as well. So that's something to look forward to in the future, and we'll talk a little bit more about that as we get closer. So I hope I was able to shed a little bit of light on what some of these call sequences and call scenarios are. And I know it can be confusing, but that's what we're here for. We are the experts in our field. We've been doing this for a long time, and we've got a team of technicians that are always able to help and give everybody a hand. So with that, I want to thank everybody for their time. And Mike, let's pass the ball back to you, buddy.
All right, thank you, Vic. Excellent job as always. Let me take back control. We're getting there slowly. Okay, so moving on to, let me share my screen. There we go. Excellent. All right. We have one Q&A question pop in. It was from Laura. She wanted to know, and I was typing up the response right before you ended. Basically, in your example where the call went to the mobile device, why wasn't the final call part, or why didn't the final call party number contain your cell phone number?
Yeah, so actually, Laura, I was just using that as an example. That didn't actually have my cell phone number. If it did have my cell phone number, that would have been considered a forward call. The one that I was highlighting there was not considered a forward because both the original and final called party number were the same. I just didn't have a very good example of a call being sent to my cell phone number. But that would have been a forward call if that final called party number were my cell phone number. The one that I had up on the screen was really just a standard answered call.
Perfect. Thank you, sir. All right. I think that's it for the Q&A. Unless someone else has a last second Q&A question. All right. Then we're going to move on to the winner of today's Amazon gift card. The winner is Ashley Chatterton. Congratulations.
Hey, congratulations, Ashley.
All right. I want to thank everyone for attending today's webinar. We do live webinars every Wednesday. Our next webinar is on April 14th, and Vic and Dre are going to cover how to update Ubuntu, the OS on the Variphy OVA. Thank you, everyone, for attending. Have a great rest of your day.